Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of VFX in Houdini. My name is Daniel Hourigan and I'm the head of FX at CG Spectrum. And yeah, I'm just going to keep going with... Hey Manik! I'm going to keep going with my explosions today. And I will finish it off today, I think. You know, I'm just going to look at some rendering stuff, show you what I did. I made a few changes in the week. So I just wanted to talk about the things that I'd done to make it a little bit better. It's actually simulating at the moment, so I'll just stop it and we'll have a look. Hey Tyson, how's it going? Hey Audrey, how's it going? Is my audio working? Hopefully it is. So, here's my Houdini. Did I cut my hair? Yes, I did a whole total head shave. Getting fresh. Sick of wearing face masks. It's making me itchy. I'm good, thanks, Tyson. Thanks you for asking. Back in lockdown here in Melbourne, so not going out much. That's right, something different. I'm not wearing my beanie to cover my unshaven head. Yeah, back in lockdown here. No, you're not crazy. Not crazy. My beard's quite a bit shorter than it was. Go back to the other streams and compare. Maybe we could do a montage, beard length montage. Hey Manik, what specs am I using? I have. Let me pull it up. Look, I don't have a supercomputer. It's okay. It's kind of mid-range gaming PC. I've got i7s. They are kind of, you can see they're overclocked. 4.2. They're simulating at the moment, so they're running a bit higher. I've got 128 gig of RAM, which is the best. But, you know, you don't need to go that high, but it is very good. And I have, for my GPU, a GeForce RTX 2070 Super. Which is not the best card out there, but, you know, when I was choosing the card, I sort of, I looked at benchmarking specs for Redshift mainly, GPU rendering, and I sort of sorted the cards based on like price to performance ratio. And this was up there. It wasn't the top one, but it was sort of, you know, second or third. And that means that, you know, for the value of the card, you're getting more value. When the price to performance ratio goes out and the price is way higher than the performance, then it's kind of like unbalanced and you're paying too much for a card that isn't giving you the same result. Two of these would be good, you know, side by side. But yeah, that's it. I got a bunch of hard drives and, you know, other junk. But it's an okay computer. I never go crazy with my PC specs. You know, I always just buy something affordable. In my experience in studios, you don't always have the top of the line computer at a studio either. You may end up on a really crappy computer, which is annoying, but you just kind of learn to work within the limitations of what you got. 128 gig has been a massive improvement in what I can do on my computer though, you know, in terms of multitasking, having 7 instances of Houdini open, or just the size of the effects that I can do as well. You know, that has really made a big improvement. So let's stop this. It's at 117 frames. We'll kill that. And let's have a look at what we got. So if you remember from last week, oh, it's clipping the top of the bounds, but we've got our camera sort of zoomed right in. Let's zoom out a little bit like that. Need to make my bounding box a little bigger, it looks like. But, you know, I could go for something like that. So, let's jump through. This resolution, I dropped it down for this sim. So we're looking at, it's a pretty large scene. So, we've got 0.5 voxel size. So, yeah, that tells you, if you know about voxel sizes, that's a pretty large, that's half a meter. But our scene is huge. You know, you can see this is 100 meters. So this explosion is about 200 meters across. So at this frame, frame 14, we got 42 million. Let's go all the way to wherever we got to, 116 or so. And here we've got 83 million. So it's not super high res. It's, you know, what I would describe as mid-res probably. Looks like we've got a bit of bound clipping happening at the front here. So we'd need to adjust our bounds a little bit. But, you know, can pick a different camera angle. And it's meant to be a large explosion, so, you know, it's going off the top of the camera, which is fine. Let's come back. Oh no, my lasagna. Vex or VOPs, which one do I prefer most? Good question. People ask me this, you know, they comment on my videos because I use VOPs a lot. Look, I prefer both. I mean, I probably lean towards VOPs a little more, but it really depends on, you know, what I'm doing. I use Vex, you know, I use it all the time, but I use it for very specific things, and I use it for simple things, usually setting attributes or if statements, things like that. Things that, you know, are a little bit more annoying to do in VOPs. I use VOPs mainly for the visual things, when I want to create ramps and noise and do things with color. Then I tend to use VOPs because it is more visual, and creating ramps and, you know, noise in Vex is really annoying. So yeah, I also, you know, when I'm not really sure what I'm doing in terms of, you know, I'm just trying things out, VOPs is like you know, it's a sandbox where you can just plug things in and plug things out. If you're doing that in Vex, you know, deleting lines or changing, you know, have to go in and edit, or it's a lot more clunky and it's not as intuitive. For me, anyway. Maybe for some people it is. But when I'm just doing R&D, research and development, you know, just playing around and trying to figure out what is the best way to approach an effect, or you know, whatever I'm trying to do, then I find VOPs is much easier to do that, where you can just change things, plug them in, plug that in there, put a multiplier down. What happens if I do this? What happens if I do that? But doing that in Vex, it just doesn't flow like that. So I think they're both good, and they both, you know, have their place. But certainly for a lot of things, I do lean on Vex. I mean, you know, in a pyro explosion, for me, there's not tons of Vex that I need to do. You can see here, setting attributes, if statements, you know, all that stuff is kind of really annoying to do in VOP, so I'd much prefer to do it in Vex. You know, setting attributes, randomization, all that kind of stuff. It's nice and easy to do in Vex. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of, it just depends. Just depends, really. I'm not a super technical person. I'm more of an artistic person, so I prefer the visual stuff. And yeah, it kind of doesn't matter. You can do the same thing in both. You know, you can't, there's no like limitations in VOPs. I mean, maybe there is, but most things you can do in VOPs that you can do in Vex, and vice versa. So it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. There's always this like polarizing, you know, kind of discussion going on in forums and Facebook and stuff like that about, you know, Vex is better and VOPs are better. Or nobody really says VOPs are better, but you know, and it's kind of, it's just silly. It's just silly. It doesn't matter. That's the cool thing about Houdini. Like, it's just, there are so many ways to do something in Houdini that one person, you know, from the next will do something completely different. Everyone approaches explosions differently, and, you know, I'm just messing around, you know, with this stuff and showing you different ways that you could approach things. Hey Burdock, any tips for ensuring the art style of your visual effects match the overall art style of the project? Look, I don't know. I mean, you know, that's a tricky one, I suppose. For me, that would just sort of come down to really studying the style of the project, and, you know, trying to work out like what are the important visual aspects. So color, color palette is probably, you know, up there. So you don't want to stray from that color palette. The lighting and, you know, the shading, that type of style, I guess, you know, when your explosions are kind of hard things to fit in if it's a really stylized thing, but, you know, then again, maybe you look at different approaches. I think, you know, really studying and understanding the visual style of a project is the key to, you know, not deviating from it. Effects in kind of stylized situations can be tricky just because it's hard just to produce stylized stuff. But at least if you are kind of sticking to those visual kind of guidelines that maybe you've set out, or maybe there are on the project of sort of style sheets or whatever, then, you know, like, you'll hopefully at least be in the ballpark with that. And then it's about trying to tweak your setup or tweak your effect to look more stylized or more realistic or whatever it has to be. Yeah, I mean, that, for me, working in, you know, film, I'm doing realism, so I guess it's less of an issue. I just have to make it look real. Although when you do magic and stuff, there are things that you need to kind of make sure that you get right. Color is usually one of those. But still, you know, you're just kind of constrained by it just has to look real. So just make it real. Why isn't it real? So yeah, I don't know. That's kind of, I don't know if that's helpful, but that would be at least where I would start. You know, if the characters are kind of geometric and angular, then you make your effects look that way, and you know, it's just about really observing the visual style of the thing that you're trying to integrate into. And yeah, certainly color is a big part of that. All right, so yeah, cool. All right. So, hey, Michael, how's it going? Next week we're going to do a new thing on the stream, which I'm thinking I might make into a regular kind of thing, maybe monthly, like a sort of viewer request session where I take a file or a problem and try to fix it for somebody. So if you're interested in that, feel free to comment, or you can send me an email as well. What was I going to say? Oh, so Michael, we're going to work on his project. Michael is a previous student of mine, and he's got a project that, you know, we've been struggling to kind of work it out and, you know, try and make it all look good and make it look great for a showreel. So I'm going to spend some time next week, 2 hours, hopefully it'll be enough, to just go through it and, you know, give some recommendations and some pointers of how you could improve it. So I think that'll be a lot of fun, and I think, yeah, it could be a good thing to do, you know, for everyone out there. So if you're interested, let me know. And I can certainly, you know, it's not going to be an every week thing, so yeah, you might have to wait. But yeah, if that sounds interesting to people, then yeah, please let me know. All right, so I'm looking forward to that, Michael. But we'll get through this explosions first. Okay, so what are we going to do today? Let's have a look at what I did. So yeah, it'd be good to put that one to bed, so to speak. So, you know, one of the things I did from last week was I felt, and this is annoying because this is a bit slow, this explosion now. It's, you know, it's a bit heavy on my hard drive, but so I can't really scrub it. Actually, you know what? While I'm yapping away, let's flipbook this, and then we can see what we got. Yeah, look, I mean, it is good to step away from things. You know, sometimes you get just so bogged down with a project that it can be hard to, you know, it can be hard to do anything with it, or hard to finish it off just because you've been working on it for so long. Maybe you can't see the errors anymore because you're just so, I mean, yeah, your mind has just kind of blanked them out, or, you know, you've focused on getting it done rather than, you know, fixing problems. I think it's good to step away from something for a while, especially if it's been a problem. I know for myself, like when I'm trying to solve a visual effects problem, or I have a shot which is, you know, which is really challenging, or I can't figure out, it's good to just step away from it, work on something else, take a break, go for a walk, whatever, you know. And sometimes the solution will just come to you, you know, wake up in the middle of the night and go, ah, got to do this thing in Vex, or, you know, whatever. I think it is good to just give yourself space from something. From any problem, it's good to walk away from for a bit and think about it. But, I also like to try and plan things or write down ideas on paper. I find that helps me. It's away from the computer. It's a different kind of environment. You know, I'm thinking with my pen instead. Maybe it changes the way you think. So I try and sketch out ideas. And I know that's not for everyone. Not everyone has, you know, drawing skills. But still, I think it's a good thing to practice. I've got like notebooks and notebooks of things from previous films where I'm just trying to figure out things. I would even, like, if I really couldn't get to a computer and I had an idea, I would even draw node graphs. Just super lame, but you know, I had this idea and I needed to get it out on paper, and then when I can get back to a computer, I'll try it out. So I don't do that anymore, but you know, back when I was learning, you know, drawing node connections and thinking about, oh, what if I hook it up this way, or you know, I found that helpful, and sometimes it solved. You know, I was able to solve problems that way. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's good to step away from projects. Let's have a look at this. Boom. So you can see, you know, from where I was last time, I've made that boom a little better. It's a bit more kind of impactful now. And I also made the cloud outside, those sort of sculpted cloud shapes that I made. I've pushed them out a lot wider, because what I was finding is they were a bit small and they were getting contained in the explosion. Another thing you'll notice is I've got these kind of ball shapes now. These sort of, you know, mushroomy cloud, cauliflower shapes. And that was something that I wasn't getting before. So I'll show you what I did with that. But essentially, that is being caused by velocity. So I added velocity to that main sphere. I've also made the sphere a bit more round, took a bit of that spiky noise off. So it gives me that more of that classic round explosion shape. And what else did I do? I actually turned off the extra large disturbance that I had, because that was actually breaking it up too much, and it was ruining a little bit of those round shapes. So I got rid of that. The other thing I did was add velocity to these outer clouds, so you can see they come out, but before, when I had no velocity, they were just kind of stopping, and it looked a bit weird. So I gave them a little bit of velocity, not much, but it just helps when they come out. It helps to give them a little bit of push so that they don't just stop dead, and it keeps them evolving. Also, because they've got velocity now, that's going to register pressure, which is driving our disturbance. So we need that velocity in there to create that pressure, that push, and then that gets turned into disturbance. So you can see that here, you know, on this stuff. Some of these areas are a little soft and billowy, which, you know, probably could benefit from being higher detail, or maybe a little bit more disturbance in that area. But I quite like, you know, what's happening here at the start. I think I did tweak the animation of this as well. I went from very small on the first frame, and then very large on the second and third frames, just to get that rapid expansion. So we got that. And then if you remember, I was animating the timescale down, so basically, you know, you can see it around here, it really starts to slow down. So we've got this kind of quick expansion at the start, timescale's 1 or higher, I can't remember exactly what the value is, but then it really slows down. And maybe that slowdown needs to be tweaked a little bit. It's a little bit kind of, I don't know, maybe it could be over more frames. just so it's a bit more gradual. It's very kind of, looks like it goes slow-mo a little bit. So yeah, you know, I'm mostly happy with it. There's definitely things that I would change, but I think it's going in the right direction. Now, you know, this goes for another 40 frames, but that's okay. That's kind of that's probably enough. Let's have a look at this ball shape that I created. So here's what I ended up doing. I took the noise down. Here's my scale. There it is. So you can see it scales up very quickly. And then down again. And it's gone a bit of a mess. Over here's the cloud shapes that I created. So you can see those. Flattening the bottoms with Vex. Just a simple if statement. If the P position is less than 0, move them to 0. And then a scale after that. So you can see that scale out. And then trailing on that will generate the velocities. So we have a look at V, you can see, there we go, we've got lots of velocities on those. So that's what gives us the push when they come out. And then what else have I got? I'm adding some noise there, just to roughen up those shapes. There's my velocity calculation on a volume rasterize being merged with the density. I've got a cloud noise on this one, which I've turned off. Probably should have turned that back on before I simulated, but it's quite slow, so that's why I turned it off. And this one here, I actually bypassed the cloud noise. So again, I probably should have had that on when I simulated, but that step is quite slow. But it does add some nice kind of cloudy details, so I don't know, it might be nice to have that on next time I simulate. Alright. So that's a cool looking explosion. Now I've got the pyrobake volume in here, which I actually think is, you know, it's quite a good node to have. We were doing, you know, a little bit of this stuff before the pyrobake volume came along in terms of blurring the temperature field to create this feeling of scattering. But this kind of wraps it up all into one, which is great. It has, you know, it has a few controls that you can play with. You can play with the sort of blurring iterations and just to sort of see, you know. Basically, it gives you that nice type gasoline type explosion, that really oily look, which which looks really cool. And you know, tweaking these, where are we? Oops, wrong one. Tweaking the mask settings, you can see when I turn the mask off, it just turns into a big emissive ball. When you enable that, that is what gives you these kind of black centers. So, you know, playing with that and the width gives you that look. So, you know, experiment with those things. I mean, maybe, you know, take it right down just to see what kind of look you get. Well, that's kind of interesting. There we go. So the mask width, you can see that's made it really small. Another thing is, you know, when you're working in the viewport is never a great representation, certainly of a volume. So you should always render this stuff as well. So let's have a look through our camera. Kind of not loving this angle now. Maybe I'll swing it around a little bit like that. And we do have a light in our scene. I'm just going to hit save, and then let's render this and see what it looks like. Pyrobake volume does create a shader as well. So you can see it there, sign material shader. So you can just use that. We'll just use that for starters and see what it looks like. Turn off progressive. There we go. Whoa, look at that. Blue. Well, that's weird. What is going on there? Let's have a look at our objects. What have we got here? We've got a spotlight, which is white. What? That is bizarre. What is that banding going on there? Weird. Maybe it's the stuff that I messed with. Actually, let's get rid of that. Just make sure everything's off. Pyrobake volume. I'll just revert these in case these are what is causing that. Yeah, there we go. Look at that. Okay. So that's why it's always good to, you know, do it in the viewport. So you can see, yeah, it has that nice kind of explosion feeling, or really flamey one. If I come back here, you can see, you know, just the density. And of course you can put your own, you know, shader on. If I was doing this without the pyro baked volume, what I would do, what I always do with pyro is just create my own shader. So let's just drag it on like that. Whenever I try to render a file, I get an error message. Rizwan, what are you rendering? What are you rendering in? And what is the error message? Compute lighting. So that's the first one that I put down, compute lighting, because that will, as it says, it will compute the lighting. Now, you can use a volume shader core, or you can use a pyro shader core. Like that. You can see there's a little bit difference. This one has emit color, K shadow, which is the shadow density, K emit brightness. So it's got a few different things. The volume shader core actually is fine. So let's plug that in. We should then see, there we go, we got density. Great. And so this is the most basic shader that you can create. Now I like to do this, I'll bind my fields in. So I'm going to bind in density. I'm going to bind in temperature. Oops, temperature, like that. So I'll plug density into here. That should give me the same result, but I like to have the fields in there just so I can, you know, do other stuff with them, pass them through ramps or multiply them against other things. Now temperature, I could feed into this emit field, and then I've got emission scale here, so I can crank that up. There you go. Lovely and white at the moment because we just don't have a color. But let's put a color in here. Just gonna go orange. There we go, we can see that orange coming through. It's super bright, so let's just turn that down. There we go. Look at that. Ah, there's that blue coming through. So it must be like when the color clips or something. I don't know what's going on there. It's kind of weird. Ah, you know what? I wonder if I've got aces on or something. Yeah, I don't know. It's odd. Alright. So this is like, you know, if I was doing fire, this is what I would use. But because we've got an explosion, you know, you kind of, that scatter stuff is really cool. What you can do though, if you wanted to use your own custom shader and you didn't want to use this one that gets created, is you can have a look at what this is doing. So turn off assign material, put that on there, and then you can see that we now have a scatter field. It's a vector 3 field as well, which is interesting. That suggests to me that it is a color. You know, it's not velocity. It doesn't describe direction. So, you know, it's got a color amp associated with it as well. Hey Rizwan, I don't know anything about Lightwave, but if you try to render directly to a QuickTime file, that probably might be the problem. The standard process for rendering would be to render to a still image sequence. So, you know, here, for instance, if I go to Mantra, you can see here that I'm outputting EXRs. So $F4 is the frame extension. It would be different for Lightwave, but you can see here it's outputting frame 4. So I would render out 140 frames or whatever of this explosion, and then take it into a compositing package, and then output a QuickTime from that. Rendering directly to QuickTime is not a good idea if that's what you're doing. One of the reasons it's not a good idea is that if your render crashes, you lose all your renders. But, you know, if you're rendering images, if your render crashes, you just lose that image that it was up to. Alright, so yeah, we're generating a scatter field here, which is color. So if I take that to my material that I made and bind scatter here and bring that into the emission color, let's see what that does. It's a vector. Ooh, look at that. There it is. Nice. So that's cool. But there's a lot of stuff going on in here in terms of this masking. There's all sorts of stuff. So what you can do is actually go to this shader that it creates. You can see it's in a matte net inside the pyrobake volume. And you can go and have a look at it. So have a look at the scatter and you can see it's on the pyro shader, this scatter control. So mask center and mask width. If you dive inside this shader, a whole bunch of stuff, which is why I like to create my own because it's very simple. But you can go and find where that mask stuff is. So here's scatter times mask times density. Yeah, right. So the error Rizwan could not initialize movie file probably means that you're trying to render over an existing QuickTime. If you change the file to like version 2 or whatever, that probably would work. But again, I would not recommend doing it to QuickTime. But that's probably why. Because the file already exists, you should try rendering it to a different file if you want to do that method. So yeah, here's where the mask is being multiplied. Let's follow these paths. And here's the scatter. Here's some scatter vex here, so you can read through whatever that's doing. Excuse me. Let's follow some other paths here. So this one is going to down here. Here's the masking. So density mask ramp, get min, mask min and max. Maybe that's what these are. Let's have a look. Mask center and mask width. There you go. So that's where the masks are being produced and they're being multiplied. So you could copy all of this stuff out, or you could try and figure out what's going on here. You can see it's actually taking the density field and let's see what it's doing. It's creating like a, quite a complex subtraction and addition type thing. So you could just mess around with it and see. Basically, one thing that you could try is to take your density field and use that to multiply your scatter. So let's have a look at that. I'm going to put this through a fit, run the density field through a fit, and then multiply that by my scatter. And you can see, we get a little bit of a change there. So let's just mess with some of these values and see what sort of result we can affect. And what else could we do? Oh, maybe I'll raise this up like this. There we go. Yeah, as you can see, this is not that great, but you can get there with it and you can figure these things out and you may arrive at a similar result or you may arrive at a completely different result. The thing I like about this is that it's completely, it's completely flexible and it allows me to do this like masking between different fields and just bring different, different things in and mess with them and create other fields if you wanted to for masks. This is why I like doing in VOPs as well, because this is kind of the way the materials work. They're all VOPs. You can do Vex, as we saw in the other Pyro shader as well, as part of this. But, for me, this is kind of the way to build shaders. And, it's a really good kind of environment for just plugging things in, testing, and seeing. Here, I could take my scatter field and feed it a constant multiplier as well if I wanted to crank that up. Play with it like that. So, there are lots of ways to kind of create and manipulate your own shader. It's a cool look. It's a bit not realistic, but it's an interesting kind of look. That's the other thing I like about it, is that you can kind of arrive at these really kind of wacky results, oddball kind of looks, which might actually be good for like a stylized kind of project. There we go, that's interesting. So it's cranking the source max has really pushed that scatter field deep inside the density there. And then if I crank this up, The other thing you could do is feed that scatter into like smoke color here. So let's see what that does. Because it is a color, you know, it could be interesting to try and feed that into smoke color. I don't know. It's giving me all black. Let's turn off emission for now. Set the emission scale to 0. Oh, there we go. So the color from the scatter field must just be. Let's multiply it. Actually, let's take this one here. There we go. So that's the color that's coming out of the scatter field, which is being set, you know, back here. That's this. So, you know, you can tweak that if you wanted to. You can change these values as well and see, you know, see what happens. But, you know, understanding these fields and how they work and what they generate is a really good way to just kind of learn how you could create your own stuff, how you can manipulate these things. I mean, that is the key to, you know, getting anywhere with this stuff, is really understanding what's going on instead of always putting down, you know, nodes and not really thinking about what's going on there. Dive inside and investigate, and then, you know, learn how you can do this stuff yourself. So yeah, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm gonna, you know, I just wanted to show you this because this is a really good way to work, and it's, you know, it's a great way to kind of learn about shaders. I am probably just going to use this shader because it is giving a pretty good result, and I don't want to, yeah, I don't want to mess with this for too long. So let's have a look. Get rid of that. Get rid of that shader. Got quite dark smoke here. Let's up the color on that. You can see it's obviously lacking detail. It needs to be a lot higher resolution, this, or potentially it just needs more disturbance as well. Let my animation play in OpenGI and make a QuickTime movie that way. Yeah, I would say, Rizwan, that, you know, you just need to change the file that you're outputting to a different file name, and that would probably work. Alright, let's try... You know, you have different options here. You can use blur steps. I think blur steps actually is a bit slower than blur iterations, but you can experiment with, you know, those things. Downsampling as well is basically going to take the field, and you'll see that the scatter field, the voxel size, you can see how it's a vector, so it's got different voxel sizes on each axis, but they should all be basically the same. And you can see they're 2 times, downsample 2x, they're 2 times what the original res was. You're currently in San Francisco. Okay, good. I'm currently in Melbourne. And you can see when I go to 4 times, it actually makes the field broader, larger. You can see it pushed into those areas a little more. And you can also, let's see, up the blur iterations, and that will kind of blur it out a little more as well, but it also kind of softens it a little bit. You can see it took the intensity down. So, you know, it's a really good idea to just sort of play with all these things and just see kind of the various effects that it's going to, you know, it's going to give you. Now, what am I going to do here? I might, actually, I'm going to jump over to the Pexels website. And I'm going to grab a image, desert image. Hopefully I can find something that's like a little bit flat. These are all Juny. It's not really what I want. And just to give me something to kind of, you know, as a guide for how I might want to light this. That would be a good image if there weren't people in it. Even that, you know, could be good, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. There's nothing really grabbing me. I mean, that's the... It's always the challenge with, you know, stock stock sites. Oh, this is one that I use in our course for explosion background. We could have some pyramids explode. It'd be fun. Hey Mitchell, how's it going? Good morning. Lockdown, woo. Yeah, I'm going to, Michael. I'm gonna, well, I'm gonna try. I mean, I'm gonna at least use that as a lighting cue, for for this kind of effect. Wow, these are just all pretty bad images. Well, not bad. They're just not what I want. Yeah, they are nice images. Come on. Maybe I should do flat desert. Well, that's not anything like what I wanted. Plains. Ooh, there we go. That's cool. Do a cool tower collapse with something like that. Yeah, I'm alright, Mitchell. Just working away as well, you know how it is. How's your draw going? Searching for reference. Yeah, Abby, I'm actually looking for a background to stick my explosion onto. Desert, mountains. Sometimes the mountains ones can have a flat area in front of them. I mean, something like that, yeah, it wouldn't be too bad. I'm just looking for something that's a bit more kind of open and... I mean, it doesn't really matter that it has a big mountain in it. We could always get rid of that. Which, could be interesting. Let's see, this is kind of an odd image format, which is the only problem there. Let's have a look. Keep looking for something. Again, bloody people shooting things on their phones. It's not useful for VFX. Oh, let's have a look at this one. They're all like not landscape, portrait. It's kind of annoying. Here we go. I mean, this is not kind of what I was thinking, but it's probably the best kind of landscape. Sorry, I know this is not terribly interesting. Maybe that one. It's a little blue. Yeah, let's do this. I'm just gonna save this like this. Probably should download it properly, but Pexels BG explosion. Alrighty. Now, what I'm gonna do is kind of bring this into my scene, and so I'll put it behind my camera in my background image view. Just go and grab that from my downloads. I mean, the resolution isn't quite HD. It's a little bit blue, so what I'm going to do is just I'm going to bring it into Nuke. Why not? Portrait is the best way to shoot landscape photos. The search for references. That's right. Yeah. Sorry about that. Usually it doesn't take me that long, but maybe it does. Maybe it takes me longer. I'm not doing it under pressure usually. Hey Tom, thanks. I'm glad they've helped. That's really really nice to hear. And if you have any suggestions or things that you would like me to kind of look at in the future, please let me know. I have this big list somewhere. Where is it? Here it is. Things that people have suggested that I'll look at when when I need something to kind of work on. There we go, nuclear explosion. I can check that off my list. Mortal Kombat Flame Dragon, Volcano, lots of cool stuff. But yeah, if you have, if you have any things that you would like me to look at in the future, anyone, please let me know. All right, let's see. Here's Nuke. Let's take a look. So, when you have an image that's kind of, and also I can see the resolution here, which is handy. Or I could reformat it as well, which would be good, so that I'm working in HD. Let's go 1920 by 1080. There we go. Look at that. Great. So yeah, I find that this image is a little bit kind of not the color that I was hoping. I could even make it black and white, which would be cool. Often, effects look really cool in black and white. It's actually easier because you don't have to worry about color. But what I might do here, and some compositors might kind of think, what the hell's he doing? But I'm just basically you can see, I thought it was too blue, so I'm just taking some of the blue out. And maybe I shouldn't take it out of the sky. So I could do something like this. Just a very quick, hacky job around those mountains with a roto shape. Yeah, I can always fix those after, but just click it out. Probably, that'll be okay. Let's have a look. We'll see a bit of a hard edge, but you can see I can change the landscape separate now to the background, which is cool. Just give that a little, just wanted that to be a bit less blue. Mitchell, we got a 3D printer. Cool. How is it? Which one did you get? I had a 3D printer. Well, I still got one, but yeah, I bought it a long time ago. And it was a lot of fun. I haven't had it working for a long time, but yeah, it's great. So much fun. All right, so I think the sky could do with a bit of an adjustment as well, but maybe I'll do a different adjustment for the sky. And I'll take the roto and use the inverse on the mask here. So under ranges, mask, invert. Now I should be able to do the opposite. So you can see, there we go, there's my sky. So, mess with that. I don't know what the sky needs. Maybe a desaturation or something might be kind of interesting. I mean, you can create some like wacky kind of scenes if you wanted to. Ender 3 Max. Oh, I haven't heard of that one. That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, it's a lot of fun to play with, and especially if you can make stuff in 3D. It's so much fun to be able to model something and then just like be able to hold the result, within a couple of hours. I found that incredibly rewarding. Still, the coolest thing I ever printed was a kitchen tap. My kitchen tap broke in my apartment years ago. Probably, I don't know, 8 years ago or something. And yeah, I was like, I didn't want to call the landlord because my place was kind of messy. And I just thought, I'll just print it. And the first one I printed, it broke. So I tweaked the design. I added some structural integrity to it in the areas where it broke. And this is just in plastic. And yeah, I put it on. I've still got it. I took it when I moved. But that was the most satisfying thing I've ever done because it was useful. All the other stuff that you print is pretty useless. But yeah, that was so cool. It just like blew my mind that I could do that. So yeah, this is kind of weird color scheme, but I like it better than the original. Maybe. I don't know. Whatever. It'll be fine. You can put a final color correct down and just like, desaturate it or add some grade to it or something if you wanted to as well. Overall kind of thing. Don't make it more blue again. Ooh, there we go. That's kind of cool. Maybe. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, nice. That's what I'm talking about. Something useful. Yeah, I've printed like brackets and things, things that I've needed. There we go. That's cool. All right, so let's write this out. Kong hair test. That's what I'm working on at the moment. Spectrum, stream, explosion. All right. bg.exr. I'll save it as an EXR just so it has a bit of depth because I've done some color corrections. If you save it as JPEG, it's very compressed. So if you try to do any grading, it just it kind of breaks down very quickly. So I'll save it as an EXR, even though it started as a JPEG originally. That's probably going to be okay. And we'll bring it into Houdini again. Yeah, you can see that one looks awful. Let's set our camera while we're here just to 1080. And then go and find this background. Oh, look at that. Nice. Okay. There we go. There's my explosion. Now you can see, it's pretty big in comparison to this background. So I'm just going to pull my camera out like this. And you can see my construction plane there, or my world 0 plane. And I'm going to line that up as best I can to the sort of ground so that I get that perspective right. It's a little bit hard to see. You can sort of turn off the background on and off to kind of see it a little better. Or you could also put a grid or a ground plane. Looks like that. That's really small. Let's make it bigger. There we go. So you could have that on as well. And that can help a little bit better because it's solid. There you go. So you can sort of see, how I can line that up. Oh, there we go. Control and space on your mouse can roll the camera. Oops, looks like I'm changing the overscan. There you go. When I hold control and zoom out, it actually changes the screen window size, which I definitely don't want to do. Let's revert that to defaults. It must be 1 and 1. There we go. All right. So, something like that could be cool. Let's see how big that is. Unfortunately, because my top of my box is probably around, there we go, there, it's there. Ideally, it wouldn't do that. I mean, we could zoom in more, but that means, we'll be we'll be a bit close. Let's just live with that and we can re-simulate. Let's have a look. Render view. I thought it would be cool, Mitchell, to print out like flip sims and stuff, yeah, just like all the cool mesh things that you can do in Houdini. It would be really cool to be able to print those out. All right, my gamma's a bit weird. There we go, 2.2. Okay, so now I've got something to aim for, and it's quite far away. The lighting on this scene, we can see actually where the sunlight is. Up here, it's creating a little lens flare. If you didn't have that lens flare though, you're looking at the shadows. You can see that there are shadows on this side of the rock. There's nothing like huge on the ground here which is casting shadows down, but you can see on the mountain here, that's probably the shadow from that peak there. So the sun is at an angle. It's not directly overhead. The shadows aren't just like straight down here. They're at an angle. So you can see here as well, we've got shadow on that side. So obviously the sunlight or the light is coming from this side. So that's what we should do with our spotlight. If we have a look through our camera again, where's our spotlight? Let's zoom out. Where's that spot? There it is there. So it's actually kind of completely wrong position. So let's just move that over here. Change it around. and it's too low, so I'm going to move it up. No, I might just choose the multi-gizmo. We can actually look through it as well. So, looks like I need to rotate it a little bit. There we go. Probably go a bit higher like that. Alright. Jump back to our camera, make sure I unlock so I don't break my camera. Also, now that I've decided on this camera, it's probably a good idea to lock these parameters. If you're like me and you always use this to look through your lights and you have it locked, I always forget to turn it off, and then I break my camera and, you know, I have to go and set it up again, which is really annoying. So let's take a look at this. I'm not worrying about the color just yet. Just want to get my lighting position right. There we go. So, you know, light on one side, shadow on the other. It's kind of good. This smoke is probably quite thin, that's why it's looking illuminated. I mean, this side is getting the light. Maybe I could swing the light around a little more to get a little more shadow here. Let me just stop that. Look through the light. Swing that around a little more. So, you know, like I was saying earlier with that question about, you know, style and making sure that your effect sits within the style of the project, the same can be said for, you know, realistic stuff with lighting. It's all about observing the scene that you're integrating into and constantly asking yourself, does this look like it belongs here? And obviously, right now, this does not look like it belongs. It's getting closer because the lighting is looking better, but the colors are wrong. You know, lots of things are wrong. But look, the color is the next thing that we need to fix. So you just go through and you know, are constantly observing. One of the largest things that's a problem, you know, for me, apart from the color, is the darkness of these shadows. If you have a look at these rocks, they aren't completely dark. You can see detail in these shadows. So we need a fill light to fill in these darks, or we go to our shader and we find our shadow density here. So it looks like it actually is promoted here, smoke shadow density. Let's turn that to 0.5. And you can see how that makes those shadows a lot less intense. So you can, you know, I mean, you can have that be really low. But we still want to see some shadows. This darkness here, I don't know if that's a shadow or if it's like outside of the cone of my spotlight. Let me just try making this a distant light instead. Wow, that's bright. Turn that down. Exposure 1. There we go. There's still, you know, some weird darkness there. I don't know what's causing that exactly yet. Alright, the next thing that we can do is the color of our light. Let's just give that a little tint. And I mean, some of these things we can do in comp as well. I mean, a lot of the color stuff we could potentially tweak in comp. But you want to kind of get it close. You want to get it, you know, not too far away, so that you don't have to adjust it so much in comp. You can see, by tinting that light, I can get, you know, there we go. Look at that. It just sits a lot nicer. And I mean, I could keep the light white and tint the smoke, or I could do both. I like to tint the lights because quite often, you know, light is not pure white. It does have coloration. Sunlight, you know, is not pure white. So we go in now, go to our explosion shader, smoke color. Let's give that a little bit of that yellow orange. Doesn't have to be, you know, crazy amount. There we go. You know, looking at this, there's a lot of red in this ground. So, you know, maybe we swing it more to the red area. more saturated you make it, the more it will blend in with the ground. There we go. But, you know, there's maybe it doesn't need to be that saturated. I mean, it makes it blend in a lot better, but, you know, is it realistic? I mean, yeah, we kind of need to work that out. All right, so I'm just going to turn off the scatter for a second and see kind of what we've got without that. So we've got very dark shadows, which is odd because I have a shadow density of 0.2 here. So that's kind of unusual. Let's just have a look at this shader. Smoke, shadow density 0.2. I'm just going to match current definition on that. Don't make it move and you can pretend it's a matte painting. That's right. That's right. Well, you know, you could certainly use this as a 2D background. Yeah, it's weird, the shadow density. I don't know, maybe it's not weird. In any case, we should probably put a fill light down. Now, an environment light is a perfectly good fill light, but the problem with it is that it's very slow. You can see as soon as I put an environment light down here, even without an environment map in, it's incredibly slow. But it does look good. So, yeah, it's this kind of catch-22 with me. I really hate how slow they are, certainly with Mantra. That, you know, I tend to avoid trying to use them, but they do, especially with explosions that are very dense and pyroclastic looking, they do, you know, make it look good, you know, because they reveal all these little details and shapes, but incredibly slow. Now we can make this faster. We can take pixel samples down. You can see that goes faster. It's going to introduce noise when we do that, but that's not too bad. You can also, let's set the rendering engine to PBR. Not that there's too much difference between ray tracing and PBR, but I'm going to use stochastic samples here. So what stochastic samples allow me to do is to set my pixel samples to 1, basically. So you can see how noisy that is. It's nice and fast, though. But then if I up my stochastic samples, let's get a 16. You can see how that smooths out the noise on the volume. It's not perfect yet, but let's go up to 32. Yeah, I mean, you know, there's a limit. So pixel samples of 1 and 1 is just going to be noisy no matter what. But you can see that upping the stochastic samples certainly makes a difference. So like if we focus on this area, for example, turn that off. Actually, maybe not turn it off, set it to 4 again. Let's see. There we go. So yeah, you can see, yeah, it's super noisy. So it's working. I think it works best really on the super transparent areas. So you can see how that cleans up a lot. The other thing you can do is take the volume quality right down, and you won't see a visual change that much. I mean, if you take down way too far, you might, but I find you can really push this and you can see it's actually speeding up the render a lot because it's downsampling the volume for lighting. It's downsampling that a lot. But yeah, you know, I don't really see too much difference there. When you will see a difference is the shadow step rate, but you can take that down to 0.5 without too much change. You can see a little bit of change there. See up here? It's a bit softer at 1. At 0.5, those get a little bit harder. Down here as well, you see a bit of a change. If you take this too low, see it just starts to really break down those shadows. It gets super fast. It gets a bit grainy though. So yeah, that's one that you can take down as well. But you take it down to the point where, you know, it starts to look bad and then just back it off a little bit. So these are good, you know, these are good kind of rough draft settings. Nice and quick with that environment light. So we can see now in those shadow areas, we've got that fill in, and we just want to, we're just comparing it to our rocks, you know. Our rocks are a little darker actually. I mean, that there and there, probably not too bad. These are thinner areas, so they're going to let a lot more light through. We could go back to our shader now and actually put our shadow density back up to 1 and see what that looks like with the environment light in there. There we go. So we've got a bit of that darkness back, which actually, you know, it does sort of match the rocks a little bit. We could always just have that, you know, maybe like 0.8 or something. So that's starting to sit in there. We've got the colors, we've got the shadows. So, you know, turn off the fire and just focus on the density, get that right, piece by piece. There's a little bit of a gap under here, which I think I would like to fill in with some more dust, but, you know, that's okay. So, let's turn scatter back on. You can see that ends up being quite noisy at these draft settings, but that's okay. You also have fire with this shader, so you can, you know, turn off scatter and turn on fire. And that's going to use your temperature field or your burn field, whatever, you know, whatever you're using. If you're using sparse, you should have temperature still. But that's going to render it as fire, not the scatter. So this isn't going to be blurred. It's just going to be a kind of, you know, pure flame shape. Is using color variation for smoke something that would help? Yeah, I mean, certainly it's good practice to use color in your explosions as well. I don't always do it because, you know, it's an extra overhead. Sometimes it's not necessary, and sometimes you can kind of create that variation in comp, or, you know, some little render tricks, or if you have different pyrosims all combined to make one larger effect, you can color them differently, which often works quite well. But certainly, you could have different parts of this explosion have different colors through a color field, which runs through the sim. And that, yeah, that could definitely look cool. And look, you know, look a bit different as well. Instead of being all the same kind of tone, it might just help it feel, you know, a little bit more realistic. So, yeah, definitely. Let's have a look at lower blur iterations. And I'll play with these as well. Let's revert that to defaults, the mask settings. You know, while you're testing the fire as well, you could turn off the environment light for a faster render. There you go, you can see it's just so much faster. And then, you know, turn it back on when you want. I'm just going to up my pixel samples a little bit while I'm doing this now so that I can see that detail a little nicer. Let's go 3. There we go. So there's our fire. Oops, keep going there. Alright, so what am I going to do? Blur scatter. Let's take that down to 1. Just play with the look, you know. It takes a while to kind of get this stuff right, so don't just, you know, don't render the whole thing out and hope for the best. Spend some time, you know, playing with the shader and playing with the settings and just see if you can get the best kind of result that you can. And then playing with the, you know, playing with the masks, mask width. Let's take that down, make it thinner. And we should see these lines tighten up a little bit, maybe. It's interesting. This sim definitely, you know, needs more detail to look its best. Oh, there we go. So taking the mask center down has given us, you know, a bit more of that kind of line detail. Let's take the mask width up now. Maybe you can take it down further and see. Hopefully it doesn't go blue. Yeah, so it's an interesting kind of look. And then you could go up and crank your scale now that you've kind of compressed that with the mask. Maybe it needs to be raised up more. Or, you know, you could also play with the blur iterations. And so yeah, the idea with the fire is that you can turn that on as well and have that on in some degree. Wowza. That is bright. I don't know what's going on there. It's a little bit frozen. Alright, so here we go. You can use ramp, so you could crush that down like that. Let's turn render on again. There we go. So, you know, turn the scatter off while you're doing that. Just focus on one thing at a time. And use that ramp to, you know, maybe just crush the fire. Oh, I got an error. There we go. It's back. So you could just kind of isolate the fire to specific areas. Or you could do, you know, as I've talked about in the past. Let's turn the smoke off. See if we can get just the fire happening. Sometimes I'll turn this off as well. So when I make a change, it doesn't immediately recalculate. So, you know, you can see those flamey details there. Now, oh, there we go. Got a little mushroom cloud, flame tree. So you could do, you know, things like this where you're just sampling a very thin section of the temperature or whatever field it's pulling in. I'm not entirely sure because it doesn't tell you. Maybe here. Temperature. So if I do that kind of little hill ramp shape, should get this kind of interesting line look to our fire. There we go. Starting to see that it's pretty intense. I might just turn that down. Back on. There you go. So you can get those kind of flamey details in there as well as the scatter field. Which I don't know. Oh, there we go. That does show up. And then our smoke. So you can play with those kind of combinations of things, and you know, they might kind of show up in different areas. It depends. The flames might not show up as much because they're sort of buried in the smoke, especially if you do something like this where you're just sampling a small section. But there you go. You can see I can crank it and have them show up. It doesn't really look... I haven't really had this work to any great effect. You can see it's sort of... It's a little bit weird. But you could play with moving this maybe around. Yeah, move it to the end. Or change the range. Yeah. Temperature field is not probably between 0 and 1. It's probably between, you know, something much higher, so you can play with the ranges to isolate a particular section. Yeah, I don't know. Alright, let's turn our... Oh, so our smoke's back on. Our scatter... You've got this hot core as well, so you can try experimenting with turning that on. And that should add a little bit of intensity to the center of this. Let's try that. A little bit. We also have... Let's see. Oh, let's try using blur steps instead. Blur iterations, we'll just set that to 1. So this, I think, runs it through a for each loop, so that it's a little bit of a different approach, and each time it does the step, it has this fall off. So you can see here it says controls the contribution of each blur step to the final result. So it's like subsequent blurs that are then merged together via like a VDB combine or something. And each step kind of falls off in its intensity. So you get more of a fade type effect. You can see as I increase the number of steps, you sort of get this fading occurring. But, you know, it can kind of, and you can have iterations within each step. So, you know, you could have 3 blur iterations within 1 blur step. So, you know, depending on what you're after, it pays to just play with these and see. I think I've found that the blur steps just seems a bit slow, and yeah, it doesn't really give me exactly what I'm after, so I tend to, I tend to leave that. That doesn't look too bad. Let's turn blur steps off and just see what the difference is. It's kind of similar, but you can see like it's introduced some of this darkness without it. I don't know. I could play with this stuff all day. Shadow might help here. So, I was saying I'd like to fill in this area, but maybe what we need here is a ground shadow to help this feel a little bit more integrated. So let's go and if we turn our ground on, it's going to cover our render, but we'll see a shadow here. So that's good. Shadow will definitely help. Let's go to the material context, and I'm going to open the library or the gallery here and go to utility, put down a shadow matte material. And a shadow matte, if you dive inside, you can see it uses a shadow matte node, and it's just plugged into the CFOF and alpha outputs. And if I apply that to my ground goes away, turns black. If I have a look at the alpha, you can see the shadow is actually in there as an alpha. Now my environment has gone away, but if I do this instead, if I turn off my camera background, copy this, turn off my camera background, so I'm just rendering on black. And then in here, in the render view, or you can do this in mplay as well if you're rendering to mplay, you can hit D to get the display options, go background, put the file in, hit apply. Hey presto, there's my background. And what's cool is I can turn it on and off. So I can just have a look at it on black or have a look at it there, and I can see my shadows. Let's turn the environment light back on. Now I would probably render these shadows as a separate pass for Nick, so that I could composite it, and it's a little bit intense, so I'd probably just play with that. We do have shadow amount here or transparency. We could try turning that on and see if that gives us a slightly nicer transparent thing, although it looks like that has affected the alpha. So no, let's try shadow amount. Doesn't really seem to be changing anything. Let's see if it's changing the alpha. No. Alright, cool. Well, that's a good case why you would want to do that as a separate render, so I could adjust that in Nuke. I'm not liking this core. I don't know if that's because I turned on the flames in there. Let's turn that off. I don't think that looks good. That little thing there. I don't remember seeing that before. No, it's just a bit less, I guess. What happened to my shadows? Stop. Alright. So... Alright, so let's create a mantra node. I'm going to call this one Explosion. And I'm going to get rid of that. $OS/. And in here, I'm going to render the explosion. And I'm going to put under matte, I'm going to put ground. I don't want to render the ground in this one. I'm just going to render it out as a matte object so that it still contributes lighting information and it also cuts out anything that might be below it. But I don't want the shadows in this one. And then I'm going to duplicate this and call this one shadows. And this one can have the ground as the candidate object. And under phantom, I'll put the explosion because I want it to contribute lighting information, but I don't want it to be present. because I want it to cast shadows. So if I stop this and go to my shadows pass now and hit render, I should see nothing except shadows. There we go, and they're in the alpha, which is great. And this background is only loaded in here into the display, so I don't need to worry about that being in my render. So I'm going to render that one to disk, frame 38. That should take no time at all. And then my explosion, I will just render that one to disk as well. That one might take a little bit longer. And in Nuke, let's go and grab my renders. So here they are here in their different folders. There's explosion still rendering. It's got a checkpoint file, so grab my shadows. Nothing, great. I may as well just bring in my explosion while it's rendering. There you go, you can see in the thumbnail it's sort of half done. So with my shadows, what you would do is merge that on over the background first before we put our explosion down. There you go. And you can see now, I can, with my merge, I can actually make them slightly less dense. Or what I like to do with shadows sometimes is just use a grade node hooked up to the shadows. Because the shadows are in the alpha channel, I can use that as a mask for a grade and pull down the actual plate, which means instead of just merging black over the top of something, I'm actually able to colorize the plate and affect the tones in the plate, which, you know, is probably a little bit more realistic. Hey, Hardik, how you going? I'm feeling much better. Sorry I didn't reply to your message in LinkedIn. Been a bit busy this last weekend, but I am feeling much better. Thank you for asking. Still got a little bit of a cough, but much better. So you can see, like, hey, that's all right, Hardik. You know, feel free to catch up the streams afterwards. So you can see, like, even if I take the take this one down a little bit, oh, actually, just like this. You can see I'm getting like a little bit of a better tonal variation, I think. And it also allows me to colorize it if I wanted to. Shadows aren't usually just black. You know, they may just be a little bit blue. So I find, I mean, you got to use this as your guide. You don't want to go crazy with the blue if your shadows in your environment aren't blue. But yeah, I find that this is a better way to go. So there we go. And what's cool as well is you can blur it if you wanted to soften it a little bit. Even do something like this where you create like a really blurred one and then merge that with your other one so that you get this kind of, see that? Just like a little bit of extra ambient shadow around the main shadow. And then by merging it, you don't lose that sharp main shadow. So let's reload this. Should be done now. There we go. It's pretty awful, you know, low res, but it's okay. I'll do a high res one over the week and we can have a look at the final result next week before we jump into another project. So there we go. You can see it sitting over the shadows, and the shadows definitely add something. You know, they add that feeling of being tied to the environment, which is great. Now we can add our final, you know, kind of adjustments to here. Although, one thing that I really need, which I haven't done, is I want to be able to control my smoke separately from my fire. So, I'm going to go back to my explosion and add extra image planes. I'm just rendering out my explosion, Hardik, and I'm just, yeah, looking at compositing. Earlier I did, if you go back, you can see I just made some color corrections to this plate or image. And now I'm starting to add the shadows and render passes. Obviously, I need to resimulate my explosion, or I could do that. So, extra image planes. I want emission. You do see, I think that works. Let's try that. render. Have a look at them up here. There it is, CE. And there we go. So I can see that CE in there. Now, I don't know if you can do this with the scatter field, but let's see if we can output that. No dice. Let's see, it might be there. Nope, no dice. These things, oh, actually. Ah, there we go, lowercase s. So there we go. I can output the scatter field, which is cool. That might be really handy if I wanted to kind of tweak this stuff in, you know, in Nuke. So I'll put that out. Let's add another one. I'm going to add CE, which is kind of all my missing component. I think the CE and the scatter might be slightly different. You can see that's the scatter and that's the CE. So the CE is kind of both scatter and fire. In this shader though, there might be some other exports that we can use. Let's have a look. Bindings. Let's go into the shader. Exports. Here we go. These are all the things that we can call at render time. Pyro smoke, pyro scatter mask, pyro fire mask, pyro second fire. So I'm going to call pyro fire in the shader, or in the render. Let's try that. You can see them up here, scatter, pyro fire. So pyro fire is nothing. That's great. Let's try direct emission. So you can see direct emission is missing. Oh, actually, no, it's probably the same as what CE was. Let's have a look and see if there's anything under indirect emission. I don't think there would be on this, but let's just check just in case. Nope. Okay. So I guess that pyro fire is probably relating to that one, which we don't have. So that's why that wasn't working. Pyro scatter. Let's try the pyro scatter mask and see what that looks like. It might be useful. Or not. Might be a you have to get the vex variable type right. But I thought maybe it was a different type. Maybe. Oh, there we go. Another thing as well is that this doesn't always update straight away. So I usually hit stop and then render again to make sure. There we go. So there's the mask that was being generated. And that's those mask width and settings. So we can output that. And that might be useful for something. So we got this. We got this. We need the smoke. So let's add another one. This one, I'm going to choose combined lighting per light. And you can see this enables light exports, export variable for each light. What that will give me is 2 passes named the names of the lights. So spotlight, you can see that's just the spotlight contribution. And then the environment light. There's the environment light contribution. Hey Hourigan, is there any trails in the explosion? I did create some trails last week, but I haven't really kind of resolved them. I just sort of showed the setup. So I won't be adding trails today to this render, but, oh, I mean, I don't know how long we've got. No, probably not. But certainly that's probably something that I'll do in the future, is bring those in and incorporate it. And again, I haven't looked at the reference. You know, we spent a long time looking at the reference in the last 2 weeks. So going back and having a look at that and just seeing like what I'm missing. I certainly want to get an additional shockwave element to put more dust on the ground so that I don't have this big hole. That's, you know, kind of annoying. But yeah, so there we go. We've got scatter, we've got scatter mask, which is cool. Yeah, that's really cool. Spotlight, environment light, and then I think I definitely also want that emission, so I'll just finally add in that CE pass, and that should be everything that I need to relight this. About the trails, do you mean, Hardik? I mean, go back and have a look at last week's stream if you haven't. I mean, for trails, for me, I do a lot of them with pops. So, yeah, we can try and take a look at adding them to the render, but I don't think they're really kind of quite right. So now we've got trails, right? Yeah, definitely have a look at last week, but I'll try and render out the ones that I had. So we've got CE, we've got our lights for the smoke, and now we've got our scatter and scatter mask, which is cool. All right, that preview looks good. Let's render this to disk. That'll take a little while. While that's going, I'm going to jump back and have a look. Oh, looking through my spotlight. Let's go and have a look at these trails. So I did two things. I did pop advected trails here, which are advected by the velocity field of the explosion. And I did these kind of procedural trails, which are sort of trying to match something that we saw in the reference. And they are also advected by the velocities. This pop sim's probably going to be a little slower now because the resolution of the explosion is a little bit higher. You can see it's sort of chugging through it a little bit. Let's have a look. So there we go, there's the advection of that stuff. And then I was rasterizing that. And that's a volume now, you can see if I zoom right in. So, you know, now based on the scale and the kind of look of this thing, I might just set my render flag there. We might want to make these bigger. Yeah, these lines might need to go their full kind of height, or you know, at least a little bit higher, something like that. We should probably like vary the length or something of these too. Maybe what I'll do is turn on the curve number attribute, and why not curve U while I'm at it. And you've got a node in here called carve, which you can use to trim lines like this. But you can put an attribute in here, I think. Let's use a bit of Vex to create. So what I turned on there was curve U and curve num. So that's a primitive attribute. Oh, actually, it's a point. That's good. So curve num gives me a different number for each line. So what I could do in here is say at trim equals rand at curve num. There we go. I just created a trim value, which is going to be different for each curve number. So you can see 19 is all the same. And then when I go down to 18 and 17, they change. Different random value. Let's try putting that in this second U slot here of the carve. So at trim. Okay, that's giving an error. Local variable trim not found. Okay, let's try doing that as a point expression. So I'm going to point to the node above, attribute wrangle 13, comma, float for the point that I want to reference. That's going to be tricky. Yeah, maybe that won't work. You know what I should do? This will work, I think. Let's put this in a for each loop. For each primitive. This will bring in a single line at a time and do my carve inside there. So, you know, like that. And then, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I guess I could probably use a detail attribute. You know what I could do here? Because inside of here I'll have my trim value, and that's going to be the same on every point. So yeah, maybe I can just pull that in here, inside of here, and say at, oh actually use a point attribute, point. I'm going to create a null just above here to reference. In carve. Well, don't worry about this. I mean, this is not, you know, how I would create trails necessarily, but this is more how I would create these very specific lines in the reference that I saw. Don't stress about this too much. I mean, this is just an idea for something that you could try. All right, so I'm grabbing the trim attribute, and it's a float, so I can put 0 there. Hey, look at that! It trimmed it. And then if I have a look at the end of the for each loop, wow, cool. Okay, so I'm going to fit that value between a range, because I don't want them to be super low, so I'm going to do between 0.75 to 0.99. There you go. And if I wanted to change the seed, I could just add a number to this and it would give me like a random seed, or I could put that in a channel. And by scrubbing that, it's going to give me a different random result. Change it. So that's kind of cool. 8. Yeah, we'll just do between 1 and 0.8. Plug that back into my attribute VOP here. It's doing my squiggles. What's this one doing? I can't remember. Oh, density attribute. And turning them into points, running them through pops. Very linear. So, you know, I may want to kind of add a larger scale noise to this as well. Maybe I'll just duplicate this attribute VOP, plug it in, and just take that frequency way down. And the cool thing about having curve U in here, generated from the resample, is, so I've got this curve U attribute, which basically is a 0 to 1 value along each line, right? And then I can bring it in here, bind, curve U, and multiply it against my noise. And you can see how now, if I put a ramp down, it'll be a bit clearer. Ramp, spline ramp. And then I can actually control where that noise is along the length of that line. So you can see if I raise that all up, it's everywhere. But if I drop this one down, this is the bottom of the line. So I can reduce the noise just in that area, or just have it right at the top, for instance. So I could apply this kind of strong, large-scale noise just at the tops of these lines. Or I could sort of have it change across the duration. So, you know, that could be an interesting thing to try. I might change this copy distance, actually. Maybe that's a little better. I don't know. If you saw it last week, you know the sort of reference that I'm trying to recreate. And it's a bit of a weird kind of effect in general. But, so let's reset that. There we go. So I'm going to run this to 38 and then I'll render it. And we've already looked at how I would create my own volume shader, so I can use that shader for this. I don't have temperature, so I don't need that, but density, you know, nice quick and easy density shader. So I'm just going to put a null down here after the volume rasterize, which is turning that density attribute into a volume. I'm going to say out weird trails. My render flag's still up here for this guy. Create another container called trails, object merge, and go and grab that. There we go. And then I can apply that shader, /matte/material builder. Let's go back there, get rid of all that business. We've got our density, we've got no emission, don't need to worry about that. Smoke color, let's just leave that as white. And let's go duplicate that. Call this one trails objects. I'm going to put the trails in, and I'm going to put under matte, ground, and explosion, because the explosion might be obscuring some of these. So let's see what they look like. I'm going to hit save. There we go. You can see the cutout there from my explosion. So there's my weirdo trails. And let's just render that to disk as well. We'll bring that in. They probably need to be tweaked quite a lot, but yeah. Alright, I'm going to reload this. And now, in here, I should see, if I click on this, I should see all my passes in this one EXR file. So they get baked into the one render file. To access them, to be able to use them for compositing, you can use shuffle nodes. So if I have a look at this, shuffle, there's my CE, there's my environment light, scatter mask, scatter. So I would go through and shuffle all of these passes out. Environment light and spotlight over here. There's my two lighting passes. There's my scatter. And what else have I got? My CE. Pyro scatter mask. Not sure if I'll need that. We can experiment with it. So first things first, what you can do is just combine the lighting passes together using a plus. Light is additive, so we always plus it together. And then have a look at that over your render. And it's transparent. Because when you shuffle, you lose your alpha channel. You can see these don't have an alpha channel. If I have a look at my explosion, it's got a nice solid alpha. So when you put it over the background, it stays over the background. In order to get that alpha channel back, you can use a copy channel. And you can see it has two inputs and it says copy alpha alpha. So I don't need this grade at the moment. I'm going to hook that up there and plug in the other input into my explosion. And we can see we get our alpha channel back. So now we can make adjustments to our lighting. So I can have my, so you can see the difference that makes. So I can have my spotlight. If I decide in my comp that my spotlight is too intense, I can turn it down, or I can turn it up. Whatever I like. If I want to bring up my environment light, I can raise that. I can recolor it. So it's a really flexible way of working, and this is the way that we do everything in film. You always work this way with multi-channels or separate render files with different render passes that allow you to tweak your image. You can see, at the moment we've just got smoke, so we need to add in, maybe we'll add our scatter first. I'm going to plus that onto my smoke. And that actually looks quite cool. Now here I could gain that up. Gamma down, gain up is a kind of contrasty type effect. So you could, create an interesting effect like that. That looks pretty cool. We also have our emission here, which has a different look to it. And we've got our scatter mask. Now this could be an interesting thing to use. It doesn't have an alpha channel, but if I plug the red into the alpha output, you can see now I'm flicking between RGB and alpha, and that's now my alpha channel. So if I used that as a mask in a grade, you know, I could potentially get some interesting kind of results. In here as well, I can crush this. It looks like there's a lot of grayscale kind of values in there, so that's kind of affecting the grade. So I could put a grade on here and set the channels to all, and I could actually crush the alpha channel there. So that when I grade now, you can see that's actually giving me that kind of line effect that I'm seeing in the emission. So that's interesting. You know, it's not really, it's a bit kind of crazy, but that's how you could potentially use that pass. You need to kind of balance it out a little bit and work with it. Or you could use it to manipulate the scatter field. So, you know, again, a grade on the scatter field using that. Maybe as a mask to erode it or to brighten it up. Play with this a little bit. There we go, introducing those lines back in. So that scatter field now almost starts to resemble the emission field. So it's useful to have all that information because you never know, you know, what you might be able to do with it. But then we do have this one as well, so we can plus that on too. Plus. Let's get, I'll get rid of that for now because we don't really need that. But yeah, it's good to know that it's there. So there we go. Let's have a look at the difference at the moment. So there's our original. There's our new one. I think that looks a little bit better. Also, what you can do here now that we have our emission as a separate thing, so we can recolor it obviously. So we can change, we want to change the kind of color. If we want to make it a bit more red or, you know, a bit more peachy or something, we can do that. We could also desaturate it with color correct. If we wanted to make it more intense. There we go. A little bit of desaturation is good. Don't want to go too far, but it pushes it into that nice kind of overexposed feeling. But what we can also do is from that add a glow. So if I was trying to do a glow on this, you know, sometimes it can be a little hard. You can see the glows applying to the smoke as well. You've got the tolerance here, which you can use, but it's even better if you can just apply it directly to the emission pass. And then, you know, take the saturation down on that, give it a tint. I like to go for a kind of pinky hue. Pinky peachy hue, I think looks kind of realistic. And a nice broad glow, like a super blurry one. Kind of looks a bit like a lens flare type effect. So you can actually even merge the glows over the entire result. Instead of just on the explosion, you could actually add that glow over everything. There we go. Gives it that kind of lens flare quality. We do have a lens flare in our scene already, so yeah, we could potentially push that even more. There we go. And it gives that feeling of atmosphere as well to the scene, which, you know, it stands out. I mean, there are many reasons why this stands out, mainly because it looks very low res, but it stands out as well because it's sort of, it's very crisp and sharp, but by putting glows in and things that add a feeling of atmosphere to the scene, also it knocks those dark values down, and that helps it, you know, feel like it's not a completely CG thing. So we can have multiple glows. You know, if I duplicate that, come off here, merge another one in, you know, either on there or another merge. With a plus, you can layer them up, different scales, different intensities. There we go. It's kind of cool. It's pretty intense, but sometimes that might be what you want. If you have a look at footage of some of those nuclear explosions, certainly they do have quite a strong intensity for a period of time, and then it falls off. So it really just depends what you're kind of going for. The grade on the emission will kind of affect the glows as well. So as I tweak, if I look at that glow and tweak this gain, you will see that that affects also the glows. So yeah, again, like everything I say, it's all about layers and just kind of adding complexity, adding detail, adding feelings of atmosphere, and just trying to get that integration as good as it can be. It still needs work, but having all these different layers, having everything split out, additional dust passes would be done kind of as extra layers. And let's see if our trails are done. We can bring them in. There we go. Our oddball trails can come in, and maybe they'd go kind of under the explosion. The explosion is there as a holdout, so it could go on top as well. There we go. Maybe they're a little fine, a little too crisp. You can play with those, make them brighter. You could even add a blur and just soften them a little bit. Also, they don't have any lighting information, so they're just purely lit by they've actually got those lights in there, the spotlight and the environment light. But what we could actually do is just take our explosion, the information from that, or our CE actually. Let's just shuffle. So you can actually just put a shuffle down like this, and shuffle all the channels, but shuffle the red into alpha again, so we get this as an alpha channel. And then I'm going to blur that and use it as a mask in a grade on my trails to give it a sense of fake lighting. So gain, what am I looking at? I'm looking at my alpha channel. There we go. So you can see now I've got this blurry alpha that I'm using to gain up the trails in a certain area to give it a feeling of lighting. So let's do this. There we go. Gamma them up to, just play around with it. And that, just even that helps to make them feel like they're in the same world instead of being completely separate. It's a little bit too intense. So, just playing with it, but giving it a little bit of a connection to the thing that's next to just makes it feel like it's, it's a little bit more integrated. Now these, they need a little bit of work, but stuff like that. There's loads of things you can do in comp to make things feel a little nicer, a little bit more integrated. Now, we certainly need to simulate this again, but what I'm going to do finally, it's not going to take 4 minutes, but I'm going to put a roto shape down and a multiply, and I'm going to make this instantly more cinematic feeling by just doing this. Choose a marquee rectangle, and I'm going to go. Does that draw out? Maybe not. Let's try again. Hey, there we go. Look at that. Nice anamorphic aspect ratio. Make it feel like a real cinema explosion. There we go. So, that kind of helps with the clipping of the top. But that's probably, where I'll leave it. And certainly, we need some more elements to make this look cool. And I'll probably work on this week a little bit, and maybe over the next couple of weeks I'll add a few things, and then when I've got an update to show you, I'll show you again. But this is probably going to be the end of the explosion series, so we can move on to other things. But hopefully there's been some useful, kind of tips and tricks in here for you, things you can build upon. Encourage you to, just to dive into this stuff and experiment with, you know, shaders and with different techniques. Of course, you know, everything that I've kind of demonstrated works with the sparse solver as well. Yeah, people have asked me why I'm not using sparse solver. A large part of it is just, you know, I like to work this certain way, so I do. But another aspect to it is, even though the sparse solver is a little bit faster, I don't find it like loads faster. Certainly not on my machine. The look is different, and that's something I don't like, you know, or I haven't found the way to get the same results that I know and love. So it's a tool, and I'll use it when appropriate. But yeah, you know, I don't think there's always a be all and end all of anything. It's just use the appropriate tool for the job, and you know, if it's not working for you, then you know, go and find a different one. I have to say, like, you know, some things in visual effects are just slow, and you just have to kind of deal with it. If it gets you the result that you want and it looks good, then, you know, you just kind of deal with the slowness and go and do something else, or work on another thing while that's happening. So yeah, you know, each to their own, and you know, whatever tool works for the job is the kind of way that I approach it. But at the end of the day, I'm going to work in a way that's kind of, you know, familiar to me and comfortable to me. And I will learn, you know, those new techniques when they come out, but it might take a little while for me to kind of switch. Or if I decide that they're not as good as what I was doing before, then I'll just keep doing, you know, what I was doing until such time as something better comes along. Okay, just cleaning this up a little bit. Cool. There we go. Not too bad. I think high res will definitely help. If you have a look at the, just before I finish, if you have a look at the, oh, this is still running. The pyro, I didn't show you that, but I just turned off, I think. Yeah, there we go. I just turned off that one. I didn't find that that was working, that large block one. I could probably change the block size or the strength or something, but yeah, I found that that just wasn't really working, so I just got rid of it. So, there we go. Yeah, look, this is the way to do it, Hardik. You know, it's a good way to get into it, is, you know, splitting out things and just kind of bring them back in and recombining them, relighting them, and tweaking as much as you can. Now you'll see if I turn this off, it's probably gonna look, it doesn't look too different. I don't know. I don't mind that now. That glow on top actually kind of makes it look a bit nicer. You can see how that really helps with the integration. But yeah. Alright guys, well that's the end of this stream. It's 12 o'clock. And next week we'll be doing something cool, which I said earlier. So we'll be working on one of my past students' files and just looking at ways that we can improve that. And you know, I'll be making some suggestions and playing around with it, tweaking some things. So that'll be a lot of fun. Please like and subscribe, and you'll get notified every time. So it's the same time every week. Hopefully I'll get the stream stuff working, because there was that extra link that was being broadcast, and I'll try and get that working next week. But yeah, have a good week guys. Thank you for joining me. Nice to see you all. See you later.